I wasn't supposed to see them. The dinner had been canceled. That's what my son told me. But there I was, standing outside his window at 65 years old, watching my family laugh around a table where my seat had quietly disappeared. That was the night I realized something painful. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been replaced. My name is Frank Whitaker. I am 65 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that heartbreak doesn't always arrive with shouting. Welcome to my YouTube channel Moral Echoes, where silence speaks. My name is Frank Whitaker. I am 65 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that heartbreak doesn't always arrive with shouting. Sometimes it comes politely. Sometimes it comes disguised as consideration. And sometimes it comes in the form of a canceled dinner. But nothing prepared me for the night my son told me Sunday dinner had been called off, only for me to find them gathered around the table without me. The kind of man I was. I am not a complicated man. For 42 years, I worked at the same manufacturing plant outside Dayton. Same punch clock, same locker with the dent in the door, same thermos Ellen packed for me every morning. My late wife Ellen used to say, "Frank, you're steady, like an oak tree." I wore that like a badge of honor. I believed steadiness was love. I believed providing was love. I believed showing up every single time was love. Maybe that's why what happened hurt the way it did. Because I had always shown up. After Ellen passed 3 years ago. Cancer doesn't just take a person. It takes the rhythm of your life. It takes the sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. It takes the way someone says your name when they're half asleep. When she was in hospice, she squeezed my hand with what little strength she had left. "Frank," she whispered, "promise me you won't disappear after I'm gone." "I won't," I told her. "Stay close to Daniel, stay close to the kids." I promised. And I meant it. Our son Daniel is 40, smart, driven, restless in the way younger generations seem to be. He married Claire, polished, efficient, always organized down to the minute. They have 2 children, Lily, 9 years old with eyes that ask too many questions, and Marcus, 6, who believes I personally invented the dinosaurs. After Ellen's funeral, Daniel insisted I come over every Sunday for dinner. "It's tradition now, Dad," he said. "You're not eating alone." And for a while I didn't. The first year after Ellen passed, those dinners saved me. I'd bring Lily a book. Marcus would tackle my knees the moment I walked in. Daniel would slap my back and ask about the old plant. Claire would pour wine and ask polite questions. But time has a way of revealing fractures. Claire's family began attending more often, her parents, her sister, and brother-in-law. They were successful, well-traveled. They discussed investments and ski trips and art auctions. I discussed weather patterns and engine repairs. Once, during a dinner conversation about private schools, I joked, "When Daniel was a kid, the only private thing about school was the principal's office when he got sent there." Everyone laughed except Claire's mother. Another time, I mentioned that I preferred homemade over catered elegance. Claire smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Small comments. Small tensions. I never meant harm. But meaning doesn't always erase impact. The Thursday before it happened, Daniel called around noon. "Hey, Dad," he said quickly. "About Sunday we're going to cancel. Claire's got a migraine and the kids are buried in projects." I paused. "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. She okay?" "Yeah, just needs quiet." "All right," I said. "Tell the kids Grandpa loves them." "Will do." He hung up fast. It shouldn't have unsettled me. People get busy. But something in his tone felt rehearsed. Still, I ignored the feeling. At 65, you learn to swallow discomfort. You tell yourself you're being sensitive. Sunday came slow and gray. By 6 o'clock, the house felt too quiet. I warmed up leftovers and sat at the kitchen table, the same oak table Ellen and I bought in 1982. At 6:30, I remembered I had left my navy jacket at Daniel's house the week before. Ellen loved that jacket. I hesitated. Then I grabbed my keys. "I'll just swing by," I muttered to the empty house. The driveway. The driveway was full. Daniel's sedan, Claire's SUV, another car, and another. Lights glowed warmly through the dining room windows. Laughter floated into the night air. I felt my chest tighten. Maybe they were just having takeout with neighbors. Maybe. Then I stepped closer. Through the curtains, I saw the table. Candles lit. Roast beef carved. Wine glasses raised. Claire's parents seated proudly. Daniel at the head. My seat, the one at the corner near the kitchen, occupied by Claire's father. My breath stalled. It wasn't canceled. It was replaced. My hand hovered over the doorbell. I didn't want to know, but I pressed it. The door. The laughter stopped inside. Footsteps approached. Daniel opened the door. "Dad." His face drained of color. Behind him, Claire's voice called out, "Who is it?" "It's Dad." She appeared beside him, posture stiff. "Frank," she said, surprised but not pleased, "we didn't expect you." "No," I replied quietly, "you didn't." Daniel stepped outside, closing the door halfway. "Dad, this isn't a good time." I stared past him at the glowing table. "You said dinner was canceled." He sighed. "We didn't want it to be a big deal." "A big deal." Claire stepped forward. "My parents are in town. We wanted something intimate." Intimate. I tasted the word like something bitter. "I would have understood," I said. "You could have just told me." "You take things personally," Daniel replied, frustration creeping in. "Because I'm a person," I answered. Before anyone could respond, the door opened wider. Lily slipped out. "Grandpa," she shouted, throwing her arms around me. Claire's voice sharpened. "Lily inside." But Lily looked up at me, confused. "Why aren't you eating with us?" The innocence of children is merciless. I knelt carefully. "Grandpa wasn't invited tonight." Her brows furrowed. "But your family." Silence fell like a dropped plate. I stood slowly. "Keep the jacket," I said. "I don't need it." And I walked back to my car. The dark. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't turn on the lights when I got home. I sat in the dark living room where Ellen used to knit by the lamp. At 65 years old, I learned something painful. Loneliness doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being excluded. And exclusion cuts deeper when it comes from your own blood. The conversation. 3 days passed before Daniel came over. He brought the kids. They rushed inside, pretending everything was normal. Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table. "Dad," he began, "Claire feels judged by you." "I don't judge her. Your comments about money, about traditions, they make her parents uncomfortable. I make jokes. They don't hear jokes." Silence stretched. Finally I said, "Then tell me, don't lie to me." He rubbed his face. "I didn't think it would hurt you that much." "That's the problem," I replied softly. "You didn't think." His eyes filled. "I miss Mom," he said suddenly. So did I. She used to smooth things over. Ellen had been the bridge. Without her, we were two men standing on opposite cliffs. "I don't need to be invited to everything," I told him, "but don't make me feel like something to manage." He nodded slowly. "I'm sorry, Dad." And this time it sounded real. Rebuilding. The following Sunday, I was invited again. When I arrived, Claire opened the door herself. "Frank," she said carefully, "we should have been honest." "Yes," I agreed. She hesitated. "You matter to this family." It wasn't warm, but it wasn't cold either. Dinner wasn't flawless. There were pauses, careful words, but Lily held my hand under the table like she was anchoring me. And I realized something important. Belonging isn't automatic. Even in families, it must be protected. The moral: I am Frank Whitaker. I am 65 years old, and I have learned that families rarely break in loud explosions. They drift apart through quiet exclusions, through polite lies, through unspoken resentment. If my son had told me the truth, I would have stayed home that night with dignity instead of heartbreak. If I had listened more carefully to how my words landed, perhaps Claire would not have felt judged. Honesty may be uncomfortable, but dishonesty is cruel. Never assume someone is strong enough not to be hurt. Never replace truth with convenience. And never underestimate the power of a seat at the table. Because sometimes, the difference between love and loneliness is simply whether there's a chair waiting for you.